Hi, Pastor Steve here in beautiful Visalia, California. We are starting into our spring season, so things are getting green, flowers are growing. I hope that it is nice wherever you live. And I also hope that you are having a good day, even if the weather isn't great. We're deep into our study of the Gospel of Mark this week. We're in the end of chapter 12 and getting ready for chapter 13, which is a major turning point in the narrative. In the end of chapter 12 and through chapter 13, the tone of the gospel turns very somber and dark because Jesus is fully then into his passion. Last week, we talked about the normalcy of Jesus being at the temple during Passover and debating with scribes and Sadducees and Pharisees. That's how theology and decision on how to apply the laws of Moses, that's how that work got done in ancient Israel. And it wasn't unusual for Jesus to be asked to debate or to comment on some of the things that were important in that day and time. That explanation holds for what we looked at last week, but at the end of his time in the debate arena, Jesus' tone and words and summation, I guess, turns pretty dark. He stops the debate about various issues and he begins to, in short order, talk about the spiritual lives and the ethics and values of the leaders of Israel, the scribes and the government officials, which is the same as the institution of their faith. And then he contrasts what they are up to and the way that they apply the law for self-gain to the actions of one of the people that he has accused them of taking advantage of and harming. So it moves out of the arena of let's debate these things to hone our edge and really get close to the truth to a more or less a type of political statement in which Jesus eviscerates his opponents, right? He really lays the wood to them. What we'll read today is in large part one of the reasons, well, in large part is the main reason that the people who were in authority in Israel sought Jesus' death, because he did not show himself to be a respecter of authority as it was given in the temple or in the government. Instead, he called people out for what we would call being corrupted by the institution. And he's not at all friendly or hopeful about it. He is very much in a mood, apparently, simply to talk plainly about that. I want to be honest and divulge that I have been the product of an institution since I was in seminary. And I will say that along the way, I have discovered there really are, in our system anyway, two types of pastors. There are pastors who are devoted to the institution and to the power that it brings them. So bishops and higher ups in our church very frequently get really carried away with a sense of their own importance and their sense that somehow they're super Christians or they should never be challenged. And they're very powerful in our system. And clergy who have sometimes mega churches or quite large churches or some other thing that denotes supposed success in ministry. They're often also pretty vain and arrogant and oftentimes mean-spirited and difficult to live with. It's been a battle with me because I'm not an institutionalist, but I have been devoted to the local church in the United Methodist tradition. And I can say when I hear Jesus speak about those who are tied to the institution and whose devotion is to the enrichment of and the continued power of an institution, it resonates pretty heavily with me. Going the other way inside my own heart and mind is the knowledge that there have also been some really beautiful examples of disciples and followers of Jesus that were pretty high up in the institution. My observation has been sometimes people are so gifted at what they do in one way or another that they get offices of prominence in our institution and they look like they are oftentimes really stuck in their loyalties, and they find it very difficult. I'm not a big fan of institutions, while at the same time I understand institutions really do have to exist. I do think that there are life cycles for institutions, and that whatever the credo, whatever the mission that started any institution, especially nonprofit institutions, it eventually gets fulfilled as much as the institution can help it be fulfilled. And I think it's a healthy thing then for that institution to give way to fresher and newer kind of pre-institutional movements who will have their own life cycle. No institution has ever solved all the problems of the world, but I read this scripture with a very prejudiced eye, because I'm not fond of institutionalists. I'm not fond of the idea that the institution is more important than the local church. I'm not fond of giving money or time or effort to the denomination when it takes time and effort and money away from the local church pursuing its mission. So I just want to be honest about that and let you know that I have a built-in bias from having existed in one way or another in an institution for a very long time, which I have found the institution to be cold, indifferent, cruel, demanding, demeaning, not a lot of nice things. There are good people who run the institution of the United Methodist Church. There are good folks everywhere. But by and large, I think our institution, sadly, kind of measures up to what Jesus is saying. Not a diatribe against the United Methodist Church or anything like that. It's just an honest reflection of, yeah, I can understand why that would hurt Jesus' heart, to see the very people who are supposed to be advocating for the common person in Israel, dedicated to their own enrichment, dedicated to their own power, and narcissistic to a level that becomes toxic and demeaning to folks. It really does change the tone of the narrative as Jesus exit the debate stage with these closing words. So I'll read them now, and we can listen to them together, and then I'll reflect just a little bit more on them on the personal level, which is where I think most productive Bible study is done. So this is Mark 12, 38 through 44, and it reads as this. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." That's a pretty harsh word. If you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, you got to know that is serious business, that they will receive the greater condemnation when judgment day comes. He then sat down opposite the treasury, and he watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins worth a penny. He called his disciples and said to them, so this is an aside privately with his disciples, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all that she has to live on." So by pulling his disciples aside and asking them to watch the widow who has been taken advantage of by the scribes and by the system and by the institution, still put her money in the treasury, which is a much greater hardship for her because she is poor and because she's been run over by the institution. Jesus is highlighting for the disciples the things that the rest of his teaching for them as they get ready to become the genesis of the new church will consist of. And that is that the kingdom, the peace that we seek in following Jesus, the sense of our life's purpose and our well-being on the deepest spiritual level, those things cannot be had by the accumulation of wealth or import or power. Like most of you who will watch this, right? I've seen lots of people with lots of power and lots of prestige and lots of ego. And I can tell you that in the way that I have observed folks like that treat other people, they lack a peace and they lack a genuine love for other people. It's a trap that can sure set into a person's life. Contrasted to that is a widow who is ensnared by her circumstance. She's poor, and that limits much of her life. She has the freedom and finds freedom and I think release by her decision to give what she can, right? To push herself to give as much as she can for the relief of other people who are hurting. And if you ever really wanted to understand what it means in essence to be a follower of Jesus, it would be that. It would be to put yourself into um, a discipleship model that will result in your willingness to sacrifice for people, even and especially when that sacrifice costs you and is hard for you. It takes a great deal of spiritual work and closeness to the sacredness of God to come to that point. I'm reading right now a reflection by an author on Mother Teresa, and it's interesting, right? When she died, there were a lot of news stories as if it were some kind of news that she struggled with her faith, that sometimes she didn't feel the presence of God, and she wondered if her calling had been sincere or not. All of her life, she had episodes where she fluctuated. That's the path of discipleship, right? We're called to a process of slow envelopment and change, in which we slowly rid the import of self and replace it with genuine love for others. And really, all that is revealed in her diaries and the things that are written about her from outside of Christianity is that she was a genuine Christian, that she continued in the faith, continued her service, continued to do what she had established was worth doing, even when she didn't feel like it, even when it wasn't easy, even when she wasn't making headlines, because she was faithful to the process of following Jesus by loving other people. And that process eventually saw her in the Catholic tradition seen as a saint. And for the rest of us, as an example of that's how you do it, right? You don't just wait until it feels good or until you get noticed or your picture gets taken. You do what's right when nobody else is looking, and you advocate for people who don't maybe have as much as you, or who you know are struggling. Those things lifted out of this narrative are really important. It is never true in any meeting in our institution in the United Methodist Church, and I think for the rest of them, that the most important person in the room is the bishop. The most powerful person, the ability to impact other people's lives in the negative, rests always in the bishop or in the exalted chair of whatever organization. But the most important person in the room is the person who sits in that room advocating for and pushing the institution toward a more godlike stance, and asks of it that those who lead the institution would actually develop a heart for the people that they are supposed to be serving, and they would dedicate themselves to that. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. On the personal level, I can tell you that in my life, I have had self-centered periods that were horrible to go through, right? There was no sense of peace. There was a panic. What's going to happen with what's going to become of me, et cetera, et cetera. And I've had periods where through a variety of losses and some great pain, I've really found myself caring more about other people and working hard to alleviate some of their pain or their discomfort, and trying hard to advocate for them. It's much better to be in that mode, in the second mode, that forces us to give and sometimes to work and act in ways that are uncomfortable for us, than it is to be in the role of prominence and prestige and power, and to believe somehow that sets you up as a super authority within the faith tradition. It doesn't. The contents of your heart spill out in the work of your hands. And I think we all are really well served to remember that. If your life is not where it should be right now, not only do we believe in the Christian faith that what you need is a deeper relationship with Christ, but we believe that you get that deeper relationship with Christ not by withdrawing to think about things, but by engaging with people less fortunate yourself and giving the best that you have to them. That frees your heart for the entrance of the Holy Spirit. So I sometimes go to preaching on this, and I'm sorry for that. It's supposed to be a Bible study, but this is a big deal. Next week, we'll look at chapter 13. If you follow this series weekly, I encourage you to take a look ahead, right? It's dark and deep stuff. It is, it's called the little apocalypse, and it's a quite uncomfortable thing for Christians to see Jesus pronouncing and saying the things that he says. We'll talk about that more next week. Again, if you're not having a great week, or if you are having a great week, enhance it and make it better by loving somebody else and by giving of yourself for somebody else's comfort. I hope that God blesses you this week. It's a privilege to be with you every week on Happy Thoughts, and I look forward to talking to you next week. God bless.